What's up, fam? And welcome to BBI Talks, episode 18. BBI Talks is the platform in which Black business owners and leaders discuss issues that matter. Today's topic is a very, very serious one. It is called Save Our Children, Child Trafficking. And we will be joined by our special guest, Mrs. Pamela Perkins Carn, from the End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network. Pamela Perkins Carn is a community advocate who is involved with the EMI Georgia Network. And the End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network is an intentional association of faith communities, organizations, and individuals formed to effect positive change in the area of juvenile and criminal justice. We are indeed broadcasting live from the X Creative Spaces podcast studios. And so now, without further ado, we're going to get into a conversation that I'm hoping that you will join in on. All right, BBI Talks, let's get it in.
We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad, they gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man, get what I need out the land. The earth is the kingdom of God. Glad that I know where I am. We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad, they gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. Glad that I know where I am.
How are you? Sister Pamela Perkins Carn, welcome to BBI Talks.
Thank you so much, Sister KARRIEMAH. And how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Well, it's wonderful to have you. You know, I've known, for those who are in the viewing audience, I've known Sister Pamela for many years now, and I consider her as well as her husband to be dear friends. And we've worked together on various community initiatives through an organization or coalition, really, which is Strengthening Families and Communities Coalition of Atlanta, which allowed nonprofits and government agencies to work on issues related to the disenfranchised and those who are in need of that support. And I will tell you, family, you know, Sister Carn's commitment to our children is truly remarkable. I mean, we're talking about a sister who literally will get up out of her bed and go look for our children who are missing at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And if she had it her way, she would do it by herself if she had to. And so prayerfully moving forward, we will have others who will have that same level of commitment as it relates to our children. So I wanted to share that with our audience before we even got the conversation started so that people would understand the caliber of woman that we're having a conversation with.
Well, if you could see blushing on my face, but thank you so much for your very kind words. Thank you, Sister KARRIEMAH. We appreciate you too for always being on the front line.
Thank God, and I appreciate you, sis. So let's talk about child trafficking. Where is a good place for us to begin? I would love to know from you, where do you think this starting point is?
Well, I think we start at the beginning, which is something we not always tend to do, which is to talk about how do we of this, this criminal violation of mind, body, and spirit. How do we get in front of it? We always find ourselves, to use that analogy that everyone uses, downstream, trying to rescue those from the downstream of the river, rather than going upstream and finding out where they're all coming from. And so if we can really have that type of engagement that we have had downstream absolutely needed, because we still have so many, any one is too many, but we still have too many children who are, we're downstream still trying to restore and who are still trying to survive. And so my hope is that we go upstream as well with just as much energy and verve and commitment to say, you know what, we can do this. We can create communities, thereby helping our children to have better lives, for example, and get in front of the factors that make our children and communities more vulnerable to being victims of trafficking, both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, especially when we speak to our immigrant community. And so how do we now, move up, stay, but move at the same time? How can we walk and chew gum at the same time? Get up and start to deal with those issues of poverty, dealing with issues of family disconnectedness, dealing with issues of behavioral health, mental health, dealing with those issues in a way helps those who are vulnerable to be less vulnerable. Since, how do we build protective factors and build them around our children and families so that they are less vulnerable to those who would prey upon them. And so that's where I'd love for us to start, not forgetting we need to be in both at the same time.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, every now and again, I'm going to not only throw out statistics, but also share some other information that we have found on this very issue. You talked about in terms of the family dynamic, and one of the things that it plays its part in the number of cases of child trafficking is runaway, when children are running away from home. And this is according to the Georgia Human Trafficking Fact Sheet. This is a tad bit dated. I couldn't find one that was more current. However, I'm sure the numbers are about the same. But it reads, 244,000 American children and youth are estimated to be at risk of child sexual exploitation, including commercial sexual exploitation. Runaways and unaccompanied minors make up the majority of at-risk youth for both sexual and labor exploitation. 41.4% of suspected or confirmed child victims of domestic sex trafficking were repeat runaways. And so when we talk about, that family dynamic, what are some of the things that parents can do? I've even heard a case recently of a sister who went into a sex trafficking ring to actually go get her daughter. Back here in Atlanta. And one of the doctors from one of these popular shows established a foundation to even help the family get her daughter back. But she said she came from a good home. They had money. They moved out to Gwinnett County. She thought they were living the life, especially considering they had come back from hard times of living in their car and the whole nine. So what would you say to parents that may have a similar sentiment? Hey, we're doing well. Why is my child running away from home?
Right, absolutely. And that is always the big, mystery. It is. It comes as a surprise to families. It comes as a devastating surprise. One of the things that, we always offer is having those conversations with our children. And not saying that parents don't check in with their children, they do, but there are certain conversations we have to start having. And they're hard conversations. They're, having a conversation about sex trafficking, about what does that mean, about sexting, about social media, about what are you and your friends having, talking about, what are you online, about the what does this you, about lyrics and songs, to dismiss that, oh, that's just noise. But there are words to that music. So we need to having those conversations of, okay, let me listen, really listen, or Google it, find out what the lyrics and what do to my daughter, my son, and let's have that conversation with our children. As a community, need to have conversations. We if you have a youth club in your your faith community or in your community, or you have some kind of community center, gather children and allow them a space to talk to you. Not all of us always talking to or at them, but give them a space where they are talking to us. We need to hear from them. We need to know what their angst, what they're upset about or have anxieties about, because that's the difference. Where we may not be listening, the person's online, the perpetrators online, listen to them, and they allow them that space to voice to give voice to whatever it is they want to talk about, and they're patient. We tend to, okay, all right, let's let's get to the next thing. Those perpetrators are, and so we need to figure out how we can develop patient and listening ears for our children as a collective, as a whole. Not solely the parents, but all of us in the community who care about the children in our community we need to build that open door. They can feel comfortable in coming and talking to us about what's on their mind. And so we have to reserve judgment,
yes,
and develop standing, and then ways and healthy ways to help our children through whatever it is they're going through. Because believe you me, best child psychologist in the world, sex trafficking. That's why the appeal is so great, because I'm listening to you, I care about you. They don't quite understand you, but I'm here. I hear you. You're so mature. I understand why they probably don't get you. And what child doesn't want to hear that?
Yes. And I'm thinking about, my childhood and how, the big thing among our community members is, as a child, be seen and not heard. You don't necessarily hear that verbalized nowadays, but we certainly express it in other ways, even if it's not, so literal. And the other thing that comes to mind when you shared about these music lyrics, man, I mean, you were in our house, you were in our home, and we've had a conversation with our children about the lyrics to songs, and the big thing was, well, I'm not listening to the words, I'm just listening to the music. That's the response. But there's a programming that's taking place, even if they are not being very conscious about it. And so how would you recommend that parents even, address that without making it seem like we're being too harsh or, too strict? How do we address that in a meaningful way where our children will get it?
Right, absolutely. We were all children once, and we all listened to music that our parents didn't like.
Right.
So it's not like we came from Mars and just dropped down like, oh my goodness, music. So I think it's a matter of saying, you know what, when I was growing up, this is what, we had this kind of music we had, and here's one of my favorite songs. And then I learned, I didn't quite understand everything that was said in the song. I like you, I like the beat, we like the beat, whatever it was. Right. But not removing ourselves as if it's all foreign to us, because whether you grew up on, whatever generation you were in, that the previous generation music was devil music. So so I think the whole thing is being authentic and being real about what you know, what you liked. One of your favorite songs might have been the worst song that your parents thought could ever been, you know, made.
Right.
But it appealed to you, and why? And so I understand, you know, we have to, again, we might have to go back a few years and think about it, but but make it relative, you know, relate they're actually going through. We all had angst growing up. We were nervous about something, anxious about something. We didn't fit in, didn't have, we have life experience. We just have to relate that life experience to what our children are experiencing today. Yeah. And a lot of it is very similar. It's just that times change. Support systems may not be as cohesive as they once were. You know, we all want to go back to the village. Well, the village is not necessarily look like it did when, you know, we were coming along. The village has changed. So we have to create a new village. And that will provide that same kind of support that we received when we were growing up and needed a community to surround us. But we just have to, we have to figure it out, though, for the sake of our children. So they're not the adults. They can't figure it out by we're adults in the room, and to have had, you know, the benefit of some wisdom that we need to put in place and in action on behalf of, you know, our youth, our children and youth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, we got to vet the village now. We can't have,
you know, well, it was then too. We just didn't know it was being vetted.
That's true. That is true. And I think it cost us significantly by not being as vocal about when we did see inappropriate conduct, and even in our families, among people who we consider to be loved ones. There, you know, there's this thing where we know when we have a family member that's not right. And we protect that family member instead of protecting the children.
Right.
And so
you don't go around Uncle so-and-so.
Right.
Why you don't need to be around Uncle so-and-so. And Uncle so-and-so is not welcome in our home because Uncle so-and-so is doing wrong things to children.
Yes. But we have to be more vocal about that in our families. How can we begin to address when it's family members? Because that happens more often than we would, you know, like to think.
Yeah, you're absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, we have to have those frank conversations. That protectionism, you know, around a family member, or that excusing the family member is not healthy. And so we have to be frank. We have to have that frank conversation and say, no, my children are not for sale. I mean, you know, they're just, you know, they're not. They're for being abused and so no, you're not welcome. You're not welcome. And don't hesitate to, and if that's a problem, then it's not your problem and it's not your children's problem. That's the problem on the other side. If condoning, you know, abusive behavior, it means that we're not welcome. Well, I'm sorry. Well, then we just won't be welcome.
That's right.
And we have to, you know, we have to take that stance. And that's, you know, that's unfortunate, but, you know, there's no other way protecting children from adults who are abusive, other than separate, you know, this is other than making safe spaces for the children and removing the,
you know,
those frank conversations, you know, with family members.
And it's a serious thing. You know, recently I was reading an article about the brother of Nicki Minaj, and how her family members were aware that he was a pedophile, and and he actually was convicted and incarcerated. He's found guilty of continuing to sexually abuse and assault a 14-year-old, I believe it was a half or a stepdaughter or something like that. And so it just goes to show you that this is not just, relegated to families that are in poverty. It happens even among celebrities. And I just want to highlight two quick ones. Fashion mogul Peter Negard was arrested in Canada on sex charges. Federal prosecutors in New York have charged the Canadian fashion mogul in connection with an investigation into allegations he trafficked and sexually assaulted dozens of girls and women. And then Keith Raniere, I believe his name is, was sentenced to 120 years in prison. This is the self-improvement guru. This is the same guy that, unfortunately, Oprah Winfrey had on her master classes, I believe, is where he was featured. So it just goes to show you, even people who we think get the nod from people who we honor and respect can still be guilty of these types of crimes. And it says this self-improvement guru was sentenced on charges that he turned female members of the group into sex slaves and even branded some of them with his initials. Right.
It's absolutely, you're absolutely right. It does. The victims tend to be persons in poverty tend to be more vulnerable to being victims.
Right.
But perpetrators come from all, absolutely. And to your point, victims get from a broad range. That's that surprise, that the families get when we're well-to-do. We have all things that our children need, or we think we do, and yet it is not necessarily. It's a crime as well as a physical crime, because you not own the person's body, you own mind. And that's what makes it so difficult. The unbrainwashing, that has to be done, because the person is mentally manipulated. And so you can Keith Raniere's, you can have the one that what we might call cults. They might even form a cult out of their trafficking ring, so that you have this worshiping kind of person of the abuser. So these were just, I said, the traffickers are some of the best child psychologists, because they figured it out how to control the mind. If I can control the mind, then I can control the body.
And I think, you're spot on. Obviously, I'm thinking about how what we once thought was the traditional way of bringing children into child trafficking has even changed. When the coalition, we worked on child trafficking and human trafficking for about 3.5, 4 years. And when we attended the ACF conferences, which is under the Department of Health and Human Services, I was just shocked by things that I saw, especially in that it's now children luring other children. It's not what you would think, this big bad, guy, woman, kidnapping your child. That happens. However, it's become even more insidious because they're using other children. They're using children and saying, hey, let's go to the mall together, as a way of luring your child out of your home. And you're thinking, oh, well, her and her classmates are going to the mall, no big deal. And so you're taking your watchful eye off of your children. Can you speak to these types of changes in how children are being lured, even being lured out of the home? What are some of the tactics that these people are using when they're manipulating our children?
Yeah, no, that's another avenue that's unfortunately used, peers using classmates, friends in quotation marks, friends to recruit. And so that's, it's just one more conversation that we have to have in understanding what's going on in the lives of our young people. Really understanding that, yeah, I mean, the 15-year-old could certainly be the recruiter within school, within the home, wherever, at the party. And again, we go upstream and begin to build that resiliency of, within helping them, our children, to have a sense of resiliency, so that, and self-worth and self-value, self-knowledge, self-awareness, that they know when a friend, approaches them with something, with that type of something clicks and says, you know what, that's not for me. And I think I need to have a conversation with my mom, my dad, my big sister, big brother, somebody who's really close to them that they trust, a trusted adult, to have that conversation and say, this is what, Tatiana talked to me about. Or this is, or the so-called my boyfriend is saying I can do this. But we have to build those trusted relationships enough that our children feel safe in coming to us and having the conversation. What did you talk about today? What happened at school? I mean, they're not, physically in school, but believe me, they're all online. So what's going on? What's your conversation like in chat room or they're sitting in? What's that conversation like? And really not, walking that fine line between when they think we're being nosy, as opposed to for your own welfare, for help. I'm here to listen. But that's because there's no bubble we can put children in and say, you're just going to stay in this bubble by anybody else. You can't have friends, you can't have. So how do we be present enough in their lives to know for them it's safe to talk to us? And that's a switch, because we're used to saying we're used to saying what you can't do. Right. Do this, you can't do that, you can't, and how to have the conversation about what you can do, but we need to talk about it before you make before you make some decisions that might be harmful to you. Yes, you can be online. You can be as part of social media. You can be on, whichever the latest one is, whether it's, Instagram or Snapchat, and those are old because they have a whole 100 more. Yes. But we have to determine what it is that they can be on. And so that means we have to investigate it. We have to be online too. The children ran away from Facebook because the old folks got on. So we have to find out what the new ones are and get in there. Right. So we're going, and say, okay, I saw this. I want to talk to you about it. We just have to, we're going to have to be present. We may have to start some parent social media clubs, because so that, what are you finding? You find it. I found this one. We're going to have to start talking to each other in a language that is foreign to us, but is very, very familiar to them. Yes. I mean, so start with, start some social media clubs for, for parents so that we can learn what's going on in that world, because we can't, they're not enough bubbles for us to put them in. They won't get approached by a friend who says, I know something. I mean, just like in college, we sent, children away to college, but in college, they're recruited there. They're standing in line at the financial aid line, walking down the line, saying, you need that bill that you're going to have to pay back. You can make that money right now. So we're going to have those conversations, not just, yay, go to college, yay, do well. But here's who's going to approach you at college. Right. And here's what I need you to understand. And here's what your response needs to be. So, don't worry about the money. It is not worth your life.
That's right. That is absolutely right. To the social media, Snapchat, I don't even know if it's as popular with children anymore. However, when it was in its absolute heyday among our young people, it actually had a locator where it would allow you to get a satellite-driven image of where your friends were. And when I found out about that, it was like, oh no, we're removing that from every device imaginable. But we're finding a lot of these apps have these tracking systems in place. And just so I can kind of give greater clarity in this picture I'm trying to create, if I have let's say, for example, Snapchat, and you have Snapchat, I can actually go to the locator that says locate my friends, and it will ping where all of my friends that also have Snapchat, where they are. And I can actually widen it or zoom in and see sitting on a park bench, because it's in real time. Real time. And there are other social media apps, Live Me, Ask Him FM, Holla, Whisper. These are all different other sites that aren't usual apps that we hear about, but they're just so dangerous because of these tracking components and because of these chatting components. So I love the idea of having social media clubs for parents. And it just seems like it's an easy place to start, is in our places of worship, because that's where we go, that's where we congregate. But I definitely believe that needs to happen. And I'm hoping someone will hear this show and start one. And then also I thought about, recruiting your friends in terms of monitoring accounts, because you don't see all of them, and children are savvy. They open up accounts under different names. Yeah,
absolutely. There are all the aliases.
Yes. Yeah. So, so that's where I think those who you do trust can be very helpful, is when they see something, they point it out, they call it to your attention, and it gives you an opportunity to address it. I want to move on from family, friends. We got a little into technology, and I would love for us to discuss schools. I know you've done a lot of work with the school to prison pipeline. And if you wouldn't mind sharing with the viewers what that is. And actually, I need to do something. I need to thank my sponsors. I'm up on a commercial break. I'm getting that look. So I want to just pause this conversation for one moment. And I want to take the opportunity to thank my wonderful sponsors of BBI Talks. Of course, it is the National Reparations Institute. The Reparations Declaration is available, and you can get your copy today. You don't have to delay at nationalreparationsinstitute.org, and it's right there on that little bar, the little banner down there. So please feel free to get your copy. If you wanted to know how much we are owed, what industries did we contribute to through our slave labor, how much land was stolen from us. If you want to know those things and the research behind it, then you need a copy of the National Reparations Declaration. And I also want to thank our other proud sponsor, which is 9th and Maxwell. Sister Pamela, you'd be so happy to know that there is a vegan nail polish brand that is owned by a beautiful Black woman. And so if you would like to get many beautiful colors of her vegan nail polish line, you can go to 9thandmaxwell.com. Once again, 9thandmaxwell.com, and that information is right there as well. And order your nail polish. And one of these days, I'm going to showcase one of her colors, because they're just absolutely beautiful. I think I'm going to wear the one called the Lotus. But I want you to go to 9thandmaxwell.com so that you can check out what color that is. And I also want to thank those of you who are on Instagram who decided to join us here at BBI Talks for just a wonderful conversation today, one that definitely needs to be had. I want to thank Sister Makia Muhammad. Thank you for joining BBI Talks. You're a new viewer. Thank you. Java for the Soul, another new viewer. Thank you for joining BBI Talks. Brother Clarence, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining BBI Talks. We appreciate you joining us another week. And Ibrahimi ATI, thank you for joining BBI Talks. We really appreciate it. Feel free to drop any questions or concerns or comments right there in that comment section. And those of you who are watching on Facebook and YouTube, you can do the same. Go ahead, leave your comments and your questions, and we'll be sure to ask our guests. So now we're back, Sister Pamela, to our discussion. We're making this transition into the school to prison pipeline. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with our viewers, what is the school to prison pipeline and how does that relate to the conversation that we're having today?
School to prison pipeline is a national trend. It is a funneling of our children out of our public school systems, out of the classroom, and into the criminal and juvenile justice systems. And in particular, there are specific categories of children who are most affected by funneling out of the education environment and into the justice system. Mm-hmm. Foremost will be Black boys, first and foremost. But Black girls are not far behind. They're an increasing. That's being children in poverty, children who are in poor, low income, poor economic status. That's and children who have been identified with perhaps a disability, whether it's a learning disability or a developmental disability, and those are the primary groups of children who are being funneled out through the school to prison. You meet more than one of those categories. If you cross over into more than one of those categories, your odds just increase exponentially. And so it has a racial and class system. And so what takes place is that they're using actions in order to exclusionary or discriminatory disciplinary actions in order to take children that you just don't want in the classroom and move them either out of completely out of the education environment or to the alternative system, which is another stepping stone to the juvenile. So that's what's taking place. And we have the Office of Civil Rights in the Department of Education, which monitors disciplinary actions or school discipline for every public school system. And that's where you really can see the discriminatory application of out-of-school suspensions, in-school suspensions, expulsions, charges, which are really criminal charges, that the way they're labeled within the school system against children as young as preschool. So to prison or pipeline, or as the fund has called it for probably more than 40 years, the cradle to prison pipeline. So it's education as removing the education, removing children from the educational process. And when you do that, left for them.
Absolutely. So why did you make the
connection
by saying cradle versus school? What has changed? What dynamic has changed that now it's the cradle to prison pipeline?
Well, it was always, and I have to give, credit to the Soldiers Defense. That's where it came from. The cradle, it's the cradle, and this is probably more than 45 years ago, they coined the phrase, the cradle to prison pipeline, because of the level of poverty, primarily, and children in poverty just are really, they experience all difficulties that are created. So Cradle to Prison Pipeline was looking at what happens to a child in poverty and the likelihood of that child being able to, successfully achieve an education just at the, the grade school level. What happens to that child by 3rd and 4th grade determines the trajectory of that child's life. And so they were looking at birth to, adulthood, and looking at what really happens to children who have the weight of poverty upon them, and all of the disadvantages that brings with it. So that within that, we started to see this application of school discipline, this discriminatory application or exclusionary application of school discipline upon particular children.
Right.
And it had a racial component to it, and continues to have that, a racial and a class. So children of color. And within those categories, boys, Black boys. So it's kind of, if you think about it, it's kind of, there's that big umbrella, let's say cradle to prison pipeline, the factors, all of these factors underneath that. These are segments of that whole timeline that you're looking at. So what happens to that child along that timeline determines which path that child is going to take. And that's what we've been working on. As you said, we worked together on that for years and continue to. Just recently, we have there's legislation attempting to remove school discipline from the climate rating, from the school climate rating, so that the school no longer gets evaluated on how our children are treated within the school environment. That's going on right now at the state level. To remove it because they don't want their discipline, they're applying discipline, to show up on their school climate rating, which says, here's the kind of school you're running. But the climate rating includes school discipline because the parents came to the Georgia Department of Education and said, we want school discipline, how that school applies discipline. We want that to be known. What kind of climate you're creating within our children's school.
And we can see over the years, I remember when I first entered into, and I'm not going to say the school system, but when I first started teaching, there was the Troops to Teachers program. And that was taking those who were, who left the military, active duty, veterans, and putting them directly in the classroom. And I think about an instance that I witnessed where, I don't know if you've seen the footage from when the military is overseas and they're patting down insurgents, and they have them put their hands up on the wall while they pat them down. And this was an elementary school. And I literally saw the teacher from the Troops to Teachers program tell first graders to turn around and put their hands on the wall, because that's what he was using as a form of discipline. And of course, you know, I couldn't hold my tongue. Family, babies, I cannot do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. However, what it did tell me is that there has to be some sort of deprogramming that takes place before you take and put someone who's been trained to kill and put them in a classroom. And for whatever reason, whoever pitched that idea did not include that. And so fast forward to another program in a middle school. By this time, all of the schools have, I think it's called in-service police officers.
That's school resource officers.
Thank you, the school resource officers. And I'm reading an article. I had to do some research on you, Sister Pamela. I was looking at an article that was talking about SB 149 best practice as it relates to the school resource officers. If you wouldn't mind speaking to that and kind of help us understand, because we're still talking about school to prison pipeline, but I just want to kind of broaden this so that we understand how this happens and who are the players that are involved in this process.
Right. The implementation of police officers within the schools really turns the school into a justice system, because that's what, I mean, police officers are there to arrest. You know, police officers are geared to protect, you know, communities. That's crimes going on, and, you know, crimes that have been reported, and, you know, get the bad person who's doing the crime. That's, our children are not bad people who need to be arrested and removed from the school. It has introduced an element only exacerbated the system pipeline. It has only increased the earlier engagement of our children into the criminal and juvenile. It has created a state of distrust between adults and students. We've removed necessary personnel, you know, like counselors, school nurses. We've underfunded those, social workers,
Ready recovery,
right? Which could actually more beneficial to students and children who are encountering issues, and funnel that money into police forces. And so what we've done is we've really just created a bad situation. It's not good. It's not a police. They're going to where they're being hired. You know, it's for us to tell our school systems, we don't need police forces to monitor our children within the classrooms.
Right.
They're geared for that. They are not counselors. They are not social workers. They are not nurses. You know, those are the personnel we need. That's what children need. They need the guidance counselor. They need the child psychologist. They need the school nurse. You know, they need the mediators who can help them work through issues. And we've seen that. I know we've seen that on a project together, seen it do far more, you know, reduce far more, you know, altercations and, you know, frustrations than the police force in the world put into a school system. It's not, that's not who they are. Our children are not the enemy.
That's right.
and we have to stop treating them like that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, and so we have to stop being afraid of our children. That's one thing. Them as human and see them as trying to deal with some really large life situations that they're not equipped to deal with alone.
That's right.
And we have to put in the resources and the type of personnel who really can help them work through. To your point, you know, a lot of family stuff and a lot of just trying to grow up stuff. And that's what we need to be working towards.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things we don't consider as well is that when you bring in law enforcement or other comparable agencies, it changes the culture of the school.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, we've been to a school in the city where an incident broke out. I think it was 2 teenagers that had gotten into a fight, which is not uncommon. Children fight. That's what they do. Okay.
Yep.
But we heard over the PA, I'm thinking you were with us that time. We heard over the PA, lockdown. And I'm sitting here thinking, am I in a prison or a school?
Right. Prison talk. Prison talk.
It's prison talk. And when I brought it to the attention of the principal, it was like she was baffled. Well, this is the language we've been using. Yes, but that's the same language that prisons use.
Right.
So when we start bringing officers in and bringing all these other law enforcement driven agencies to the school, it actually changes the entire culture of the school.
Absolutely. And
our children will begin to pattern themselves after that change of culture.
Right.
You mentioned that there are organizations that help with a wraparound approach of resources to our young people. I think it's important to name them. You know, we had reading recovery that was defunded. And to your point, you mentioned that those who end up in the school to prison pipeline or cradle to prison pipeline sometimes have been identified with learning disabilities or learning indifferences. And so you may be able to address that deficiency academically by simply having the support right there on the premises. But of course, remove that. We had healthy relationship-oriented nonprofits like More Than a Conqueror that go into schools and talk about relationships and friendships and things of that nature. Why do you believe that there is such a aversion to having more of those types of resources in our school than law enforcement? Because it seems like law enforcement would be more expensive at the end of the day. Uh-oh, I think she's frozen. Sister Pamela, did I lose you? Okay, I think Sister Pamela is frozen temporarily. Hopefully her internet will reset. But you know, it's one of those things where we really have to begin to look at this differently. While we're looking for to get Sister Pamela back on the line, I had cited some apps earlier today, some social media apps that we as parents need to be mindful of as it relates to people luring our young people into child trafficking and in some instances, human trafficking. I listed earlier the social media apps, but now I want to kind of list some of the dating apps because, you know, nowadays people are not necessarily going out to clubs or they shouldn't be with the number of COVID cases, but there are dating apps that people are using more frequently, like Grindr is one. Another app is Badoo, Plenty of Fish, Meet Me. Messenger apps are Kick. And then one that I thought was really crazy that child traffickers find themselves using as a resource to lure our children, believe it or not, is Calculator. Calculator. Apparently, despite its name, this app does much more than hard to solve math problems. Other than basic calculator function, the app allows users to store secret photos, videos, files, and browser history. Can you believe it, Sean? Okay, I think our guest is back. Let's get her back on the screen so we can continue where we left off. Okay, here we go.
I just went away.
You were frozen. you were in frozen land.
I was in frozen land.
But the question, I'll ask you one more time, and I'll shorten it. The question is, why is it that we are not putting the money towards the supportive resources, but rather putting it more so in law enforcement, which appears to be more expensive? Or is it not more expensive? Maybe I'm making an assumption.
No, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's far less expensive for us to do that front end work, to put the funding with the right resources, than to pay for law enforcement. As a matter of fact, there was a billboard that Gwinnett Parent Coalition to dismantle the school to prison pipeline had up in their area, and for their school system was paying $10 million for school resource officers. $10 million, the Gwinnett County school system. So tell me where we spent just show it to me where we spent $10 million on guidance, counselors, school psychologists, school nurses, mediation, restorative practices. What could we do with $10 million for our children? Just imagine.
A lot.
For the whole community. I mean, you could then have, the whole kind of home visits that need to be, could be conducted, so that the school is not so removed from the community, and not just this place where the children go. You could then actually have that kind of engagement, that connectedness that we need to have. And we need to do that despite the money. We, the community, need to be connected to the school. So we have to start volunteering. We have to start tutoring or being mentors, or showing up at the school to say, I'm here, how can I help? Be a greeter in the morning when we get back to the safe environment that we hope to get back to soon. That we need to get more engaged. We do. We know we're busy. We understand that, but we can't be too busy, because too busy leads to what we have now.
Absolutely. And some schools, private schools primarily, they actually mandate that parents commit to a certain number of volunteer hours. And they say, if you don't volunteer, guess what? We will revoke accepting your tuition, and you can take your child someplace else.
Right.
And I like that. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. It's a challenge, yes, but to your point, it's even more challenging when we're having to address things on the back end, when we can just start to be more preventative. Now, when it comes to the virtual realm, because you mentioned now where, the school is more so online, and my husband and I, we were having this conversation earlier when we were preparing, and we were both surprised to know that the cases of child trafficking have actually increased since COVID. And I was blown away at that idea, because I'm thinking, well, if your children at home, that should mean they're safer.
They're online. And we know that's become the #1 way of recruiting, is online. And that was something that was definitely a big concern of our Health and Human Services Department division at the state level and at the federal level, because online has become the recruitment tool. And so how do you track, abuse and neglect when you don't see the children? You can't, you can't go into the homes because of, COVID. How do you check up on, families to make sure they're doing okay? And yeah, across the world, there's been an increase in trafficking, and without the ability to monitor or have those conversations where somebody would disclose.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to see everybody every day like you used to. Well, did you hear, so and so this happened at so and so's, or this happened at, we don't have those conversations because we're not together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, and like we said, perpetrators find ways. They find weak when there's a break in the link. That's where they fill in the gap. Mm-hmm. And we had such a hard time with, responding to COVID as a country, but mm-hmm. the abusers, the perpetrators, the predators, whatever you want to call them, traffickers, they know how to fill in gaps. That's, they know how to fill in a gap. And we are still, we're just getting to vaccines. And that's been a big concern. It's just been a really big concern that was the fear, that if the children are not present, the village can't see them. Mm-hmm. And protect them in a way that we are normally, around to do. And yeah, so that's one of the direct results of this, of quarantining. Although it saves lives, mm-hmm. It also, there are vulnerabilities in there as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Wow. So I want us to, if we can, talk about legislation. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be the final series of questions from me, and then we'll give an opportunity, obviously, for you to share some of your thoughts and some of your call to actions. As it relates to the legislation, where are we now in the state of Georgia as it relates to child trafficking? What is it that we need as a community need to be on the lookout for?
Well, one of the good things that's come out of, these years of advocacy from so many organizations and so many advocates is that there's not a lack of legislation. Legislators now tend to are looking for ways to draft, it seems, legislation, anti-human trafficking or anti-child sex trafficking legislation. And there are a couple of ones that are moving right now. I know there are a couple of Senate bills that have moved over to the House, Senate Bill 33 and Senate Bill 34. They were, drafted in the House, drafted in the Senate, and actually have crossed over into their House committees. And so it looks like they're on track to, be passed and signed into law. So Senate Bill 33 deals with the victim's ability. This is one of the litigation bills, victim's ability to bring litigation against their trafficker or the perpetrator. That should use the right language, executor. And then Senate Bill 34 is about the victim of being able to execute a name change. And so if you want, definitely look at Senate Bills 33 and 34. And there are several others. There are probably a dozen pieces of legislation dealing with some form, dealing in some way with trafficking. Now, all of them have moved, but some are in the pipeline to be, in their respective committees, like Judiciary Committee. But 33 and 34 have actually taken off and moved from one chamber to the next. So definitely take a look at those too.
We sure will. And what is it that we can do to help support? I mean, is it about writing emails, sending emails, or sending letters? What can we do?
Just go to the right now, I think those bills are in the House. I want to say House Judiciary. I'll definitely send you the information. Make sure that you see which committee they're in. But call your representative at this point. Call your House representative, your state House representative, to let them know that you support this bill, that when it comes to the House floor, there's every expectation that these two will come to make it out of committee and get to the House floor, that you want them to vote yes for it. You want them to support those two bills. And so that's what you can do. And if you don't know who your House member is, your state representative is, then you can go to the Georgia General Assembly site, which you see actually the LEGIS on the screen, .ga.gov, and it will take you to the Georgia General Assembly site, or you can just Google Georgia General Assembly, and it will bring up the website, and you can click on, find my legislator, and it will take you to another site that you can just type in your address and your zip code, and it'll tell you who your state legislators are, both your state senator and your state representative. And then contact those persons. Contact the state representative at this point to say, I support Senate Bill 33, Senate Bill 34 on these are, more anti-human trafficking measures. Mm-hmm. And when they come to the House floor, I want you to vote yes, or send them an email. Either way, call, send an email, or do both. But that's another opportunity to speak up.
Awesome. Yeah. I appreciate that. And are there any federal bills that we need to be mindful of?
Well, on the federal level, there's always legislation. Right now, the concentration has been a lot on COVID. But supporting that, because it has funding in it. It has front-end funding. Mm-hmm. So, to help families and stay in their homes. Mm-hmm. So when we start thinking about trafficking, child trafficking, we need to start thinking about what makes people vulnerable, what makes children vulnerable. These evictions are dangerous to children. Mm-hmm. And so homelessness is a huge part. You talked about the runaways. Well, runaways are homeless. They become homeless by virtue of, running away. And homelessness is a huge factor that makes children and adults vulnerable to being trafficked. One of the studies that was done here in Georgia, at one point, it said within 48 hours. And then just a couple of maybe about 3 years later, they were like, oh, it's within 24 hours of a child becoming homeless, running away and becoming homeless, becomes ensnared in trafficking and child trafficking. And so we don't have a long time now to go out and say, we got to find this child before the traffickers find them, by virtue of them being homeless. So definitely the COVID bill that's out there now, that's at the federal level right now, providing funding to, and moratoriums on evictions and funding to keep people rental assistance and, mortgage assistance to keep families in their homes. Mm-hmm. That's a key. That's a key to saying we're not going to make more children and more families vulnerable to being trafficked. Mm-hmm. That with the food assistance, we've got, funding. So that bill is critical to the health and welfare of our community. And so we have to understand, it doesn't necessarily have to have the word trafficked in it, mm-hmm. or to actually be a preventative factor in helping our children to be, not be trafficked. Mm-hmm. So all of that's in that, the funding that's in that bill is critical to addressing trafficking just as well as addressing food insecurity. Yeah, food security. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now, I don't know if you had a chance to see the clip that we played in the beginning of this show. It was really highlighting a home that the community knew was being used to sexually exploit children. Mm-hmm. And the outrage was behind a missing youth that they knew had probably been at that home at some point in time. And, since you brought up housing, especially, I just wanted to know, what power does the community have behind getting rid of people who own these homes, mm-hmm. That they know are being used to exploit children. You know, I guess you would think after a series of calling the police and one of the witnesses shared, yeah, we've called the police, we've done this, we've done that, and there was no movement. But is there anything else that the community can do to drive these people out of their communities and ultimately put them in prison?
Yeah, you know, those, whether it's an absentee landlord or a negligent landlord, the thing is that we elect people to represent us in our cities, especially, you know, at the local level. We tend to focus a lot on the presidential election, you know, and but the people who are elected at our local level are far more responsible for our level of living than actually the president. So we elect people at the county level and at the local level, our city council, our commissioners. We elect the sheriff, department, which does serve evictions. But those policies that are made by our local officials, you know, directly affect how our neighborhoods either thrive or not thrive. And so depending on the policies that are in place, as far as, you know, our cities or our counties have in place regarding, particularly our cities, because some of our counties are now all cityfied, you know, that means they're mostly cities instead of, you know, a big county. But our city officials, we need to call them to task. If you have, you know, a house of ill repute, I'm trying to be nice, you know, in the neighborhood, there is a city there is somebody who's sitting on that city council who represents that district. And that's why we need to know who, you know, whether you voted or not, that person still represents you. You still elected that person or those persons. And so we need to get to know who represents you and make your voice known, make your issues known, and don't let up as a community. And people who want to represent communities need to understand that comes with the responsibility of representing everyone.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So, Sister Pamela, we are winding down. You've been so gracious with your time. I really appreciate it.
It's good to talk to you.
Is there anything that you would like to share or to discuss as our closing points?
Just invite everyone to visit End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network. We have a Facebook page, and it's easy to find. It's EMIGA Network. We have a website as well, and as you can see on the screen, and let us know what you're working on. We have a monthly meeting. It's usually the fourth Monday of every month. And so March, I think 22nd is going to be our next meeting. We invite you. We're all virtual, you know, because of our COVID situation, and look forward to hearing from you. We have a lot going on. We are, Sister Karriemah, working on a campaign, and it's called Changing the Narrative. And it's particularly changing the narrative about our children, about how the language you're talking about, the prison talk, changing the narrative about how we speak about and to and for our children. Because how we speak about them is how the world then views them.
Absolutely.
So we want to change the narrative.
Absolutely.
So hopefully everybody can join in with us and work towards that together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would love to participate in that in some way. And I, you know, just from the spiritual teaching that we've received as well, not only will they begin to change the environment, but it will also be self-fulfilling.
Yes.
So our children will actually begin to manifest the negative or the negativity that we are bringing forth to them by way of words, by way of our environment that we put them in, and the circumstances that we put them in. I thank you so much, Sister Pamela. Obviously, we couldn't get to everything in this conversation, so I would really love if you could, come back at another time so that we can also, because we didn't get a chance to really get into mass incarceration. That is a conversation all to its own, and I would love for you to come back so that we can really unpack that, because I think that's just so critical. But I think we really touched on a lot of information today, a lot of good information that I think people can walk away with, and I feel good about that. And prayerfully you do too.
Absolutely, thank you so much. We thank God for that.
Yes. And we've got homework. Look, we need one of y'all on Instagram or YouTube or Facebook to start that parental social media club.
We need it.
We also need classes, free classes on how to teach parents how to listen and be patient. I mean, it may sound strange, but many of us don't know how to be patient, and we don't know how to listen, because guess what? No one was patient with us and listened to us. So we can't give what we didn't receive.
Amen.
But I thank you so much, Sister Pamela Perkins, Carn with the End Mass Incarceration Georgia Network. Please look for them on Facebook. The information is right there on that line. And then, of course, I want to also ask, hey, if you enjoyed the show today, you learned something, share it. Go on to YouTube, hit subscribe, click on notifications, so that way when we go live, you'll be right there with us in pocket. And for those who didn't realize, I have a little change here. I got a little banner. Y'all see? Look, I've got the best producer in the world, who also is my hubby. So thank you so much for getting that together, and just really just being such a great support and resource for this show, because obviously I'm not doing this by myself. I have a wonderful companion and life partner and purpose partner in my husband, and I'm very, very grateful to him and everything that he contributes. So I want to also thank those of you who are on Facebook, on Instagram, and YouTube for joining BBI Talks. We'll be right back here next Wednesday at 3 p.m. We've got another conversation that needs to be had, and we want you to participate. I also want to thank those of you who joined us on Instagram that I didn't get a chance to greet you. Hot Ice Live. Hey, that's my big brother. That's Ken Rye. Now I have to take you all the way back to WPLK.
Oh my goodness.
Ken and Ken. I don't know if you remember. It's Ken Rye and Ken Beatty. May God be pleased with my big brother, my mentor, that was my heart. So thank you so much for joining BBI Talks. I really appreciate you for logging on, big brother. Thank you, Baby Gods. She has a beautiful book for children's book. That's Baby Gods. And I want to thank I Am Totally Awesomer. Thank you for joining on Instagram on BBI Talks. So like I said, I'll be right back here next Wednesday, God willing, at 3 p.m. with another edition of BBI Talks. I thank you for choosing to be with us today to have an important conversation on saving our children and child trafficking, which is episode 18. See y'all next Wednesday.
We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad, they gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man, get what I need out the land. The earth is the kingdom of God. Glad that I know where I am. We gotta bring businesses back. My business is black. My business is black as the universe. I know why they mad, they gotta react, cause we're universal influencers. I can supply you the man. I can supply you the man. Get what I need out the land. Glad that I know where I am.